Most of the women who are in prison are victims of violent behaviors, of violent crime, perpetrated by the abusive men. But because our system is patriarchal in a way, it doesn't mostly respect the rights of women. So you find most of the women go to prison. It's not even the issue to do with only the law. You also have issues to do with our curriculum. You also need to decolonize our curriculums. Because most of the time we have these normative tendencies or believing that the global north is the one that should shape the production of knowledge in global south. Whichever, for me, I don't even believe in it or even trust, because I also believe, like, when you look at the global south countries like Kenya, we are multi-ethnic communities, meaning we are people from different ethnic groups. Our culture and tradition is quite diverse. So we need also to incorporate some of the stuff about us in our curriculum. Whatever sample, let's say whatever problem the global north has is the same problem we have. We also need to understand our own issues.
Benson, who are you?
I'm Benson Njongoro. That's mostly the name. If you want to find me wherever you are, that's my name. I'm upcoming criminologist. I'm currently pursuing my doctorate degree at Glasgow University. So I'm really focusing on long-term legacies of British colonialism in relation to law, punishment practices, and imprisonment in post-colonial Kenya.
Did you always know that you wanted to pursue law at a doctorate level?
Yeah, basically, I wanted, when I was growing up, I used to see how police used to brutalize many people back home. That is basically because I grew up in Murang'a. So my time we had this Mogeke thing, and young people used to be abducted, other people used to be killed. So I felt like there is a need I do something that I'd be helping those in conflict in law.
So at what point did you start pursuing your career?
So I remember back in high school, I was a prefect. So I used to defend other young people when they do stuff. So I used to go to pray to the deputy principal, because the principal was quite tough. So I used to go to tell the deputy principal, this is whatever actually happened. I think this one we can do it in this way. And even we used to dig people digging a grave for yourself, like a huge hole, and then as a punishment. So I used to tell the priest, that's not a big deal. But the thing is, you're wasting much of the time digging that hole. Maybe you can just give us, maybe Ken also just gives us some work to do, maybe wash the D hole or the laboratory, wherever you want us to do some cleaning, and punishing these people in that way, because you're wasting much of your time. So then the deputy was a close friend of mine, so he used to tell me, like, you can become a good activist or fighting for the justice for the others. So I felt like that's the way I want to go, because it was a passion from my upbringing. And then when I did my class 8, then I decided, okay, well and good, I have to think about what I should pursue. So I found I had to go through various universities and see whatever they are offering. So I decided now I need to apply a program. So I applied for the bachelor degree in criminology, criminal justice, and public safety. And then I was admitted, and my journey started during the first year. I remember very well, first year is just learning the basic stuff and so on. So I developed a lot of interest in learning about the community, how law is formed, how the poor people get oppressed by the rich people in a community. Because basically in Kenya, that's the situation that we are in. Like, most of the people in power, they oppress the underprivileged people in the community. So my question has been, how can then we help to equalize, to have a level ground, like every person in the society could be treated equally. It doesn't matter whether you are rich or poor. So then I continued like that. But before even done with the first semester, we had this thing we used to do called striking. It was common back then. We strike, we went back home. So I remember when we went back home, so I decided to volunteer with the National Police Service at the local police station, basically based on whatever I learned in those few months before we went for that strike. So then but during that time I was in the station, I used to observe whatever charges people are being these are offenses which people are being accused of. So I realized most of the offenses people get accused of, they are quite petty offenses that if you go with our own traditional way as African, that is just a thing that they could have compensated or reconciled and they arrive moved on and they could coexist peacefully. But you find that most of people opted to take people to the court, and sometimes I felt bad that we don't need always to be using the court system as the only sort of problems or cases. So I proceeded. But when we went back home, after a while we came back to the school. Then we are done with the first year. Second year, we started doing these courses related to law, criminal evidence, criminal procedure code, and then the others forms of law or other type of law in Kenya. So, and during my studies, I was quite, and for my time, most of my time, I spent my time mostly in the library. And sometimes going to the lecturer, asking them about maybe why this is the way it is, and why are we still applying this. And one of the unit I used to love most is the criminal law and Kenya Legal, introduction to Kenya law and legal system, because they realized that they had codified some of laws that were used in Britain back in 1887, that is 12 August 1897, that was still applicable in the current situation in Kenya. So then I remember we had this one of my friend who was a lecturer called Tabitha. It was a nice lecturer. So I used to ask her, why is it that we are still referring to this section of law? And then they have already been repeated in Britain. So he used to tell me, like, if you want to learn more about this, you have to continue doing like furthering your studies after this, so that you could delve deeper into whatever is actually happening. Then we go to that year, then have to decide where we should go to for the attachment, because basically in Kenya, like the institution, usually for the public institution, they don't even find for your place to go for attachment. So I found a place near my place, Githunguri Law Court. So during that time, I spent most of my time in the court registry and in court during these court proceedings. So my interest was mostly on criminal procedures or criminal cases. So I used to go to listen, sometimes sit with the court clerks, the prosecutor, and listen to how they are adjudicating or like how the court process are about when they are adjudicating. Let's say, for example, an assault case, stealing or theft case, and I realized like there is no any kind of distinction. When you steal, it doesn't even matter whatever you stole. Stealing is stealing. And when it's robbery and stealing, they could even account for like a heavy penalty, or you could be even in prison for 15 years for just stealing a goat, a hen, or chicken. So there is this one of the magistrate. I used to go see Kutwa. I was the principal magistrate at Ngongoro Court by then. So sometimes when I'm free, I could go and ask him how then are you using this kind of punishment? Somebody stole like just a chicken, and then here you are. You're just maybe for him he was quite a liberal person, because he used mostly to jail them for 3 years, and you could find the other cases depending on the magnitude, depending on the criminal procedure code and the penal code, you could only jail them for at least the minimum of 8 years. Is not according to his will. That's what they were used to tell me. That's not according to my will anyway. It's basically based on our law. And then I used to ask him, then what do you think we should do to address this issue? Because now, like we have alternative dispute resolution, and I know it's part of provision within our constitution. Why then don't push these people to go for a reconciliation? And then he used to tell me, sometimes I do, like you have been here, you have observed, sometimes before I even decide I will proceed with this case, after people take plea or before they take plea, I could advocate for reconciliation. But some people persist that they want the court to proceed the normal way. So, and when they do so, have no any say. I have to respect their rights, and then I say let's get the full court process. And then when I went back, like after that process, I was full of many questions that I realized that there is a lot of need to be done in matter to do with criminal law so that we can decongest our prison, because you find most of our prison are decongested or they are overcrowded because of those petty offenses or those petty crimes that could be addressed using our own traditional justice system of reconciliation, compensation. Yeah.
So I remember just while we were having the conversation before we got live, you mentioned something about the relationship between the traditional African laws and what was instituted by the British colony on Africa. Do you still believe that there are some rules and laws that we are actually following that could have actually been solved in the African traditional way and give people a more or easier leeway towards some crimes which are more brutally penalized than they are?
Yeah, I think there is, like, if you look for the asset, the way is normal, like, basically now, most of our African communities, like, for young people, fighting is a normal thing, like, to prove, like, now you're a man, you can defend your community. Sometimes people just argue a bit and then somebody just slap you. You go report to the police station, just slapping somebody. Like they go, yes, it's bad. I know, I acknowledge it's bad, but they go report to the police station. They become an assault case. And when you look at the section 251 of the penal code for assault, there is no way you have to be incarcerated at least for 3 years. And it's something that even like you could have called the men, like some age mate, your age mate within your community, or even your friend, to just talk with the guy who slapped you and get this an apology. And maybe if you're injured, the guy could have catered for you for the medical expenses. But sometimes people, because of that, I think now we feel like we are more bred to be protected by the Constitution that end up causing more damage. Because if this person, let's say you just slap, and then you go report this person jailed for 3 years, the taxpayers, they are the ones that are going to cater for all the needs of the convicts. When you go to prison, that person who assaulted you. So at the end of the day, it become a burden to the taxpayer. And also at the same time, it lead to overcrowding of the prison. Another thing is, another crime is like stealing. Sometimes when when you're growing up as a young man or young boys, you used to go and eat mangoes whenever you feel sugar cane and so on. Sometimes you find those petty crimes, like somebody could go and maybe just take some 20 mangoes from somebody. These days, you have not asked for permission or request for permission to get those stuff, or those mangoes, but somebody go and report you stole their mangoes. So when they say that, the police will come and arrest you, use those mangoes as evidence, and then that would be stealing. They give you like maybe the first charge, counter stealing. The second one would be trespass. So at the end of the day, you find this young person maybe could go to jail for more than 3 years for something. If you feel like this person wronged you, you could have requested that person to repay you in form of money, in the form of an apology that he or she will account that will not be the same. But most of the people, to feel like they have been honored and respected in the current situation, they usually look for the court proceeding or the court procedure rather than going back to our own traditional justice system.
So how did you end up into your master's program?
So back in campus, after coming out, or like after finishing my attachment period, I went back to campus, and then I think after thinking about the word of the former lecturer, Madam Tabitha C. Kutwa, the former principal magistrate, and my dream and my aspiration for life, I thought, now I think I need to, when I'm done with this undergraduate degree, I need to further my studies. But I realized, mostly in Kenya by then, we had never had any masters in criminology and criminal justice. And we had this lecturer, a friend of mine called Robert Minor. from Nyahururu. So mostly usually known as Ambassador Romba. So I went to him, he spoke, and then he told me like, we have this Commonwealth scholarship, huh? You're a bright student. Why don't you give it a shot? So that is in that year. So when we went to fourth year, I started applying for my scholarship even before I graduated, because I was quite certain and how I was performing that. Usually I was anticipating that I'm going to get second class then, or first class division. So there was no any discussion on that. So after I applied at KCA University, they told me to wait for the transcript and stuff. So I waited until my transcript were out. Then after they were out, I was amongst the best student. I managed to get first class honors. And after that, after sending them all those, like the transcript and the certificate, I was given unconditional offer. And after that, that is what, during the same time I sent to them, that's the time they opened for the shared scholarship. So one of the admission officer, I just did an email to them and told them, you know what, I don't have the money for the course, despite having applied. So they told me like just apply for the common share scholarship, and then that's exactly whatever I did. And after applying for that, KCA University nominated for me for that funding. And then I got this notification that you have secured the funding. I was so happy.
Which year was this?
That was back in 2019. Yeah.
So you did your master's in 2019, 2020?
Yeah, sure.
Then between 2019, 2020, I remember that was during COVID, right? Did you go back in Kenya to practice, or what happened?
So because that time we had this lockdown, you could not have gone back home. So most of the time you could only stay here until you're done with your stuff, and you could not move in and out of this country because of this. We had this quarantine thing. You used to fear if you go back home, the government that time was ruthless to the people coming from abroad because of fear of COVID, spreading the COVID-19 virus. So I decided to remain here. I remember very well, I even wrote the email to KCA University. So because they asked me, what's your plan? Are you going to remain here, or are you planning to go back home? I told them like, for me, I'm just okay. Just remain here until everything is okay. Then I could go back home. Yeah, and that's after that, after COVID-19 now, we had this national open after lockdown, slow down, we could travel, people could travel and outside the country. That's when I went back home.
So which year was this?
This is back 2020 at the end.
Towards the end of 2020. Yeah. That's more or less like after your graduation.
Yeah.
So did you go practicing?
Yeah. So after that, I went back home. I stayed for a while without doing anything, just contemplating whatever I want to do. Because one of the things that was my master dissertation was about the integrating women offenders back in community after they have served their prison time. So I had much interest of most of the women, because I know I was brought up by my mom for quite a while, my late grandmother. So I okay, I just need to do something for women, because as much as I'm doing all these things, where I have been is just because of support I have received from the women. So I went, and we have this friend of mine called Zipporah Derito. He's from National Police Service. So, and we went, sat down, and then deliberated about whatever could be done about the sex and gender-based violence. And then we started the process of for coming up with this National Police Service called Polycare. I was part of the team. So we started with the Nairobi area. That's our first station for sex and gender-based violence victims, because we found most of the women who are in prison, they are victims of violent behaviors, of violent crime perpetrated by the abusive men. So, but because our system is patriarchal in a way, it doesn't mostly respect the rights of women. So you find most of the women go to prison. So I found I told Zipporah but then what if we come together and help these victims of crime, of these gender-based violence? And then we started this process, and now I think we have several Polycare centers, which is one-stop gender-based centers in Kenya that usually assist these victims of crime, mostly women and young girls.
So how long did you do this?
I think it's the whole of 2021. That was whatever we are used to do, sitting down, opening that center. We had even the construction of that center. So we used to call, like, I remember there was this time Sankaja was there, Tura Kirozo Jr., Esther Pasalis, we have Honorable Nyokabi from Nyeri. They all came up, when we had been like opening of that center, and we are looking for money so that we can complete the whole center.
So at what point did you decide that you actually wanted to do a PhD?
After this, after doing my masters, after we have built that center, I went on teaching because I realized after I did my masters, I could not get funding because of COVID and some other funding I was getting. Their passion, I felt like I was not ready for this. I need to take a break at least before I proceed because of this COVID-19 thing. So back in 2021, I decided let me go to the university and try to teach, and then as I figure out if I would pursue my PhD.
So you served as a lecturer?
Yeah.
Where was this?
That is KCA University. So I started teaching back in September. I remember it's 1st September 2021 as a tutorial fellow. So yeah. So during that time, I started interacting with students, trying to listen to whatever they say, trying to understand, because you have these course structures, course outline, depending on how they are drafted according to the curriculum that was in place. I realized as much as we are doing this, it's not even the issue to do with only the law. We also have issues to do with our curriculum. We also need to decolonize our curriculums. So I have been in KCA from 2021 up to now. Yeah, teaching.
Why decolonization?
Because sometimes you find we also need, because most of the time we have these normative tendencies of having or believing that the global north is the knowledge production, is the one that should shape the production of knowledge in global south. Whichever, for me, I don't even believe in it or even trust, because I also believe when you look at the global south countries like Kenya, we are multi-ethnic communities, meaning we are people from different ethnic group. Our culture and tradition is quite diverse. So we need also to incorporate some of the stuff about us in our curriculum, because I know like in Kikuyu, whatever is defined as a crime could not be the same as defined as crime in a Muslim or Somali community, a Kisii community, a Maasai community. We have various definitions for crime, but you find this global north definition, like we have already borrowed, the global norm definition of crime, which of course create more problem than solution to our issues. So I think it's quite like our young people back home, they need to learn about themselves, because whatever we tend to learn is much on the Western perspective, and we don't even focus on our issues, because I don't think whatever sample, let's say whatever problem the global north has is the same problem we have. We also need to understand our own issues. So we also to incorporate some of these critical issues to do with crime and law back home than importation of the global north, or mostly from the British, because we are British colony. Most of stuff that we import is from
Brits. So do you think Africa is free?
It's not free. I don't know how we are going to be free. But I think to some extent how things are back home, because of these young people, enlightenment of young people, trying to say that the governments should now address the issue basically based on our own norms and tradition and the culture as a society, as a Kenyan community or society as large. Is the only way to go, because now, if you look at the education sectors, if you go to the most of these libraries we are having in back home, yes, we have people, scholars, and other people, researchers who have to some extent written about our life as Africans and so on. But whatever is being credited is from the global north. And when you're doing the literature review part of your work, like when you're undergraduate or doing masters, they tell you start from the global perspective, then come from to a local or national perspective. So if you don't go with that route, They just discredit everything. So it's meaning that they are putting more emphasis that for you to have a local perspective, you have to use the global, not the knowledge as to check if your knowledge is applicable in a African setup, and it could be the vice versa. So that because we need to use our local knowledge and see how we could harmonize it with using the global node.
So what could you suggest we use as a strategy to decolonize education in Africa?
I think now is like this. We need to review. Much of it is to do with the review of our curriculums in most of the universities. The vice chancellors should be very keen on that if they want their university to have global reputation. It's not just saying that we are doing this issue to do with decolonization, but when you go to the ground, whatever curriculum they have is just the replica of the global north universities. They don't even have a unit in ethnicity, that is, or even decolonization or coronation or colonialism as part of their curriculum. Much of it is they just copy paste whatever other countries are doing, but we need our own unique that quite often addresses like our local issues, and then have another another section part of the curriculum that maybe speak about the global issues, and at what point then we can use to have harmonized this knowledge production, so that maybe we can have this global epistemology. Yeah.
So your PhD is on decolonization, right?
Yeah.
What is decolonization?
Decolonization is now like in a basic term or a simpler term is like is like creating awareness about the harm of colonialism, how colonialism impacted in our community. We have to accept that. Then at the same time, trying to see how we can amend the harm of decolonization by referring back to our traditional justice system, and thinking, maybe imagining how future could be without those, without colonial imposition of acts or other related issues. Because I think much of it you find in Africa, like we are still tied with the colonial definition of our way of life. We forget that you can go back to a traditional justice and maybe look at other contemporary issues that are quite non-decolonial, like they're not colonial, non-colonial issues. And maybe we can have a very post-colonial life.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about what that could look like. And, the world is changing so fast.
Sure.
Should we also be changing the definition of colonization?
We should not, like, we should retain I think whatever is, we have blurred definition of colonialism, because I think whoever came with the definition of colonialism must be amongst the people who colonized Africa. So we have to have an African definition of colonialism, and also the African definition of decolonization. Then, so that at that level, you could find you could better understand the situation based on the victims, because basically you find most of the African, like for me, my late grandfather used to tell me whatever the other went through during this colonial era, how they used to be victimized by, and how even he had some bullet remnants in the head because of brutality of the British soldiers. So I think it's good we get definition from the people harmed. They are but not from the colonizer. Because if you have definition from colonizers' definition of colonialism and decolonization, they tend to favor them in so much. So that's why you find that now and then when they're saying we are trying to help Africa, creating restoration, that's why you find many NGOs go back home, do a lot of nasty stuff, and because they're trying to civilize us or decolonize our system, they end up creating more harm. And they don't even get concerned with the local people, whatever they want, because I believe if they are concerned with whatever the local people want, even I don't think any of the Commonwealth country citizens need a visa to be in UK, because that's one of the first thing. They need better schooling system. They ruin much of our livelihood and so on. They create a lot of issue in our family because you find most of the people injured as a result of these Mau Mau movement, liberation movement. They are still suffering outside of the young people. They are being cared for by their daughters, sister, and they are not well able. Whereas the British government should take account and maybe pay for the medical of those people they injured.
Now, let's get back to your PhD for the remaining part of the conversation. Where are you currently?
Now we're in the last stage. When you're in year one, you're in last stage of confusion. You're just there, but you're not there. You just try to get things done. But the best thing is currently I'm just working on some advanced method courses for research design, qualitative design, and quantitative design, and some other trainings offered by the ESRC, because I'm fully funded by the Economic and Social Research Council and Scottish. Yeah, Scottish. I'm fully funded by the Scottish Graduate School of Social Sciences. So you find we have a lot of these courses because I'm using various type of methodology. So you're gonna find I'm using archival research. I'm going to use interviews. I'm also going to use focus group discussion. I'm also going to use creative writing because I would like to hear from people who are affected by the justice during colonial era, how they could imagine the future of justice in Kenya. So I'm also going to have some write-up on the fiction writing on the imagined justice future. So, and I'm looking forward to that because I know I have a very supportive team of supervisors.
You are writing a book.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I know I'm gonna write a book on various issues as I proceed at various stages of my PhD, because I know during this period of collecting data and when I was doing this kind of focus group discussion, I envisaged having this kind of discussion with people affected by justice and maybe hear whatever they would like justice to be in future. So I'm planning out of those scripts, maybe I could come up with a book apart from other articles maybe I'll write along the way in this journey of PhD.
Yeah, I mean a PhD is, in my opinion, a very interesting journey. Because one day you discover you can do this, the next day you discover what you can't do.
Yeah.
So you have to sit down and learn. But I hope you're having a wonderful experience. How is your experience so far at your university? Which university are you in?
I'm at Glasgow University. Yeah. So far the experience is quite good. For me, I can say I have, I think, the best supportive supervisor anybody would like to have, because I know Professor Sal Armstrong, Professor Andrew Smith, and Dr. Mother Kanyoya from KCA University. They are quite supportive. If I have any issue, let's say I would like to know this and this, we could have a meeting. We usually have a meeting every month so that we could discuss my progress, where I need their intervention, and how far I am with the PhD. So, and much of the resources I want, I think, is provided by the university. And another thing is, if I would like, because at one point I believe I go to the Oxford University, we have this colonial office at the Q Library or the Q Museum. Some of these British offices, I go leave you some colonial document that form part of my thesis. And I know there is a provision under my funding for institutional visit. I can use that money, go stay there for a couple of weeks or month, do some review, write up, and then go back to my university, my home university, and my center.
What next after your PhD?
So I think that's a quite tricky question. Because one thing, when you're doing your PhD, you're not even quite sure
About what?
About what is the next after. I would say every step in a PhD is a new experience, for the masters, and it depends mostly with whatever you're working on, because you might say I would like to go to academia, I would like to go to research, but you might end up becoming an activist in life, fighting for the justice.
Yeah, that's true.
And because I have been those kind of activism back home, I know how it means to help the vulnerable in the community. So, but basically, I would also like to go to academia and research, and at least use this thing to do with decolonization of the curriculum back home. I know back home we have this, our VC, Professor Isaiah Wakidiki, is quite welcoming, and then you have Professor Joshua Bagaka, the DVC academic. I know with them, I know everything is possible. And then you have one of Professor Margaret Mwenje. Usually call him Mom. She has been with me throughout my studies from undergraduate and so on. She's at Kenyan University currently. So I know they are my support system if I need something to do with whatever I'm working on and to actualize whatever I feel we need to do back home. I'm quite sure they will hold me hard.
Yeah, I wish you all the best for the remaining part of your PhD. And what advice could you have for somebody who is looking forward to start a PhD?
You have to be passionate about whatever you're working on. For those people who want to come and join PhD, well, first thing is like, have passionate about it. Another thing is like, know who are your supervisor. Just find a supportive supervisor because it means a lot. If you are in Western countries, if you don't have like these supportive supervisors, you are doomed because they have a lot to shape your PhD journey. Another thing is like, think about the funding sources, because it's quite expensive to pursue a PhD because you need a lot of materials and tools. So think if you want to apply for common scholarship, you have ESRC and other sources.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And that was a very insightful conversation.
Welcome, Joseph, and I'm happy for hosting me. And I'm looking forward to further our conversation on the same and other related issues.
All right. So that was Benson Njongoro, and this is the Management Diary. Your host today was Omae Joseph, and until we meet in the next episode, bye-bye.